So what do you think of my latest Yardadori? In this video I'm going to style this for the first time. I'm going to wire it out, I'm going to pot it up, and the final image of this video will be this tree completely wired out, potted up and ready for its life as bonsai. Now, which angle should we plant this up? Always difficult. Right, so how do you decide how to plant it and how to pot it up? A few things that you need to keep in mind when styling material like this. This comes from a forest. There's not a lot of lower branching. Quite often the bonsai turn out to be very tall or very twisted and contorted to make a short tree. I'm going to go for a tall tree. And one of the things that I use to tell me what the front is, of course, I dig down a little bit and I find roots. Now, if I look at just the roots and I try to get the roots in one equal plane, this would be the optimal planting angle. There's a root coming out here, there's a root coming out here, and in the back at the same level there's also a root. Yes, I cheated for the video, the leaves were there just for fun. I already looked for the roots. But let me put this in this position on a turntable. So this is always the first step for me. I look at the root base and I see whether that will give me a nice planting angle with which I can work. And the reason is the root attachments are difficult to correct. Yes, of course I can air layer and I can put the layer at an angle, but normally the root base is a fixed thing. So if you can create a bonsai where the root spread, the nebari, is nice and even and horizontal, then it helps. Let's take a look at this tree now. So what we notice furthermore, this tree is old. It has a lot of broken bits and pieces in the bark. There is some old calloused over wounds. That's nice to see, but it has it all around, so that doesn't define anything. We have this angle here, and if you look at it, this is almost exactly 90 degrees. That's not very pretty. People are very good at recognizing these sort of patterns. So by rotating the tree a little bit, you can see that this angle gets softer, it gets more gentle. If we then would decide that we bring the tree back up, it is almost gone. So there's only the main question: cut this one off, cut the left one off, or use both. In this case I would like to use both because I liked that it has a double trunk. This pine was dug up a year ago from one of the fields near my house. A friend of mine often goes out with one of the hunters and then they pull out some trees, and sometimes I'm lucky and I get one like this one. These two work together. This branch comes back over, and this one fills the space in between, maybe with a very long dropping branch in there on this side and one on that side as well. I'll wire this one from here to there, this one roughly from there and upward, but the rest on the bottom I'm going to do with tension wires. So these sort of trees that come from a forest often have very thin branches with only a few needles. They look weak, but they're actually strong enough to be gently wired and positioned, and later on these needles next year they might double in size if they get more sun and the plant is better positioned. To balance out the weaker branches, maybe a little counterintuitive, but we're going to also weaken the stronger branches. So taking off all the older needles and just leaving maybe 8 or 10 needle pairs at each tip. That way this branch gets relatively weaker, that one thus gets relatively stronger. Now here it has very long needles, so I'm quite happy with just leaving 5-6 needle pairs on there and removing everything else like I'm doing right here. Be careful if you're doing this work. There are of course buds that could be in the way. You don't want to pull buds off because every back bud is valuable on a tree like this. So this is one of those cleaned out branches. This I'm going to do throughout the tree. So there we go, same tree. I have only removed the needles as explained, and I've not trimmed back any branches yet, but you can already see the tree is getting much lighter, but also what used to look like very, very weak branches is now more in line with what the rest of the tree does. I've noticed this tree has a few aphids, so I'm going to spray the tree after I've wired it out. And one little thing to keep in mind when you're working on these trees, what you're going to find at some point is that there's little buds forming. And in contrast to deciduous trees, pines and other conifers do best back budding, and the buds develop best when there's actually sap flow going through. So removing the needles around a bud is a bad thing for coniferous trees. You leave a few needles, maybe even 1 or 2 on a pine, at the base of the bud. That over winter will feed the bud, will strengthen it, and in summer you'll have a stronger growth from that bud. So when you're pulling needles, keep that in mind, that you leave needles around every single bud that you find. It is important to realize this is a first styling, and there is some more branches on than needed. I did not want to remove everything, just to make sure the tree has enough power to go. As you can tell, these branches were very weak compared to the rest of the canopy, but now this looks equally strong as there. That means that when the sun comes out in spring, these branches will have enough power to compensate for the fact that they're lower on the trunk than these, and therefore keep up. These I'll of course pinch more in springtime. I'm not completely happy with the top here. Could in fact and you dear viewer can actually see what I'm doing, and I'm not really able to see it, but I'm not going to move around too much anymore. I'll put it back into a semi-sunny spot, avoiding the midday sun, although it is now early winter. Should be alright, also in full sun right now. Right, we are now middle of winter, and I really couldn't wait anymore, so I found a pot. This is a very feminine pot. It's quite small, but it is a pine, and pines like it dry, so small pot is good. It has quite a big hole for drainage, and it has 1, 2, 3 wiring holes. So I'm going to fix a solution to put a wire in 3 holes. I'm going to put a gitter over it. I'm going to put a mesh over the hole. Going to pull this one out. I'm not going to prune the roots all that much. I'm just going to remove some of the old substrate, plant it into a new pot, fill it up with pure bims, wait for spring. Of course, repotting within half a year of wiring out and pruning a pine is not the recommended practice. So if you can, wait a bit longer. It's better to wait a growing season before you repot. So there is a slight risk that I'm going to lose this pine because of the action that I'm going to do right now. I see most of the roots are still there. I just removed part of the soil. On one side I pretty much bare rooted it, and on the other side I left some of the original topsoil. And I'm now planting it in a pot, making sure that the 2 out of 3 wires are on the side that gets most load. Just sliding it in as you would in any normal repot and wiring it up. So moving the roots a little bit to the side, make sure that the wire goes in between and doesn't crush too many of them. Over a big root here, tighten it a little bit, take one of the ends and wire it up. All done. It's now repotted. But the one thing, if you do these things on video and you don't actually take the time to look at what you are doing, you may plant it up in the wrong angle. Of course, I originally said, this roughly is the planting angle. Now, I'm not going to change it now. I'm going to leave it in this pot for a year at least, so that it can establish, the roots can set, the branches can set, and then 2024 is the time that I'm going to replant it in this pot, probably. Don't really want to disturb it right now again, but yeah, probably put a little piece of wood underneath the pot so it sits like this. That was stupid. Anyway, this was Jelle. Keep growing bonsai. See you later.